Hello, welcome back to Scottish Independence Podcasts. This week we are back, would you believe it, at the Bacchus Bar with Pensioners for Indy. I say we, Marlene is there, I wasn't there on this occasion. And although we've just finished the series that Pensioners for Indy were doing, which you know all about, you'll have seen, Pensioners for Indy also had Graeme McCormick as a guest. It was a very interesting presentation from him. And then the discussion kind of went in a slightly different direction, didn't it? So over to you, Marlene.
Well, it's the Bacchus Bar, and Graeme McCormick has a plan. He lays out the plan. It's called the 9 Steps to Independence. He lays it out, and from its sort of start. Well, I suppose it starts from now because he'll be campaigning on this plan. He's not standing for Holyrood, but he will be talking about this. If we could just follow these 9 steps of Graeme's plan, then Scotland would be independent a year after the Holyrood election. Now, you might be thinking that's not very likely, but actually it is fascinating how just Graeme, he has a very logical starting point, and then he just follows it through and follows it through and follows it through, and you end up thinking, oh, we could do that. Yeah, that could happen. His starting point is really clear. It's that Scotland's part of a voluntary union with the other nations in the United Kingdom, and then it just starts from there and lays out how we can disengage, secede from that apparent arrangement. It's fascinating.
I think before anybody gets so excited thinking, oh great, we've got a plan, we should just say that this plan was put to SNP conference, who didn't vote for it. He's not given up on the plan, but this is not SNP official policy by any means. What I found quite interesting is some elements of it, there are things that have happened when other countries have become independent. So it does seem to me to be a really logical place to look for what is the process by which we can do this. And, I think it's short-sighted if it's been completely dismissed out of hand. And I don't think he's going to let it go quite as easily as that.
It's just fascinating, and it's really worthwhile. It's really worthwhile listening. And as you say, it's certainly not SNP policy. It's not any political party's policy, but it is a really good bit of logical thinking. So anyway, here we go. 9 steps to independence.
Thanks very much for having me. Basically, this is to sort of tell you why a number of us in the SNP proposed a resolution for conference. And initially it was members from Helensburgh, Oban and Lorne and Tweeddale. And we wanted to basically show that we could create a legal means by which Scotland could be independent even if the UK government didn't consent. So we put our heads together and we came up with a proposal and we submitted the resolution to the conference committee. At the same time we asked John Swinney, we gave him a copy right away and we said, could we have a meeting? And after about, 5-6 months, we're still waiting for the meeting. But instead of speaking to us, within about 2 days, he produced a resolution, which was basically a dissertation in nothingness, to be kind. Anyway, produced that, and we didn't think that we were going to have our resolution on the agenda. However, the convener indicated that they would prefer to have the leaders' resolution and they would allow amendments. So we had about over 40 branches who were supporting our initial resolution. We held a meeting in Perth to try and attract as many people as possible to discuss where we went from there. We prepared 2 amendments. And if any of you know about how the SNP do these things, if you produce an amendment, they'll really only accept an amendment which is just basically a variation of the initial resolution. In our case, we were actually putting something in completely different from the resolution because John was obviously promoting this idea of the SNP winning a majority of seats at Holyrood. We were promoting the proposal that a majority of votes for independent supporting parties at 2026 on the list vote was basically a mandate to instruct these independents supporting parties to deliver independence. So it wasn't just talking about it, but actually acting to deliver it. So it was very unusual. But anyway, they accepted. We put in 2 amendments, one a long one a short one. We were basically told the long one was too long, and because it went into so much detail. So we put the shorter one in, and it was accepted for discussion. And so that's the background behind it. So what we had prepared was basically the kind of 9 steps towards independence, and the first one was basically to get the SNP to actually discuss it. I suppose looking back, this, you know, the chances of it being accepted at conference was pretty slim, given that there is a considerable payroll vote in the SNP of people who either are employed by the SNP or earn their crust by dint of the SNP, and of course there are also aspiring candidates, so they probably thought they were obliged to follow the leadership. But anyway, we put it, and we argued it along with, I think there was another possibly 3 or 4 amendments which were kind of less material.
You said 40 branches.
Yeah.
So how many branches in total are there in the SNP?
Well, I don't think the SNP know how many branches there are in the SNP just now, because there's been such a change. For example, my constituency is Dumbarton. We had 4 branches, we're now down to 2. Some have been moribund for God knows how long in the party. There's changes in the boundaries as well, the constituency boundaries. So we don't know. But basically, as a kind of rough idea, I reckon it was about a quarter, something like that. Something like that. It was 48. Well, we had it kind of fluctuated, you know, but we had a lot of branches didn't manage to have meetings. Right. Just with the timing, etc. So it made it really quite difficult, and headquarters were not forthcoming in circulating it. You know, we had to find who they were ourselves.
Set the deadlines quite tightly.
Well, they do. That's right. You know, that's right. And the other thing that they have now is that they encourage you to put your draft resolutions to the Policy Development Committee to basically tell you how to write a resolution or an amendment. That really, in the past, that has just been a way of basically cutting stone dead your resolution. So we didn't do that. We just waited and just stuck it in to the conference committee, and you know, that's basically what happened from there. Okay. So anyway, the first basic step was what wouldn't work. You know, what couldn't we do? Given that the Supreme Court has already decided that the Scottish Parliament doesn't have the power to call really a referendum, because basically the Scottish Parliament is the creation of the Westminster Parliament, and in that book Westminster is stubborn on there, but it was also very important that the devolved administration, both now and once the election is passed, it can still use its existing powers. So we didn't want to do something which would endanger the workings of the Scottish Parliament. We also rejected the idea of a universal declaration of independence. Some of you might remember Ian Smith and Rhodesia and all the problems at that. You know, folk with wrong memories will remember that. So, and basically, Scots are wary of that kind of adventurous kind of politics, I think. And colonies have used UDI in the past because, you know, their masters wouldn't consent to their independence. Now, I accept that Scotland, the Scottish people might feel that they've been treated as a colony, and I've got the greatest regard for liberation and all the rest of it, and you know what they're endeavouring to do, and I believe, you know, every way that we can and every route that we can examine and try, we should do. But basically, this proposal was on the basis that Scotland was not a colony, but is a partner in a voluntary union. And we're reminded of that, and have been reminded of that on several occasions by Westminster. There's been votes and all the rest of it, etc., as well as in the Scottish Parliament itself. So that cancelled these out. The second step was basically to consider this our right to choose, which is obviously a phrase that John's been using. And so it was, how do you hold a vote of the electorate which demonstrates beyond doubt the will of the Scottish people to either stay in the Union or dissolve it without Westminster's consent. Now, while the Scottish Parliament cannot hold a referendum on a reserved matter, the Scotland Act 1998, as amended, which created the current Scottish Parliament, did not state that the actual vote at a Holyrood election could only be used to elect a Scottish Parliament. Consequently, if the total votes cast in the list vote showed a popular majority in favour of dissolving the Union, then that is a mandate to deliver independence. It has the added benefit of legitimacy, as unlike a standalone referendum, which opponents might boycott, opponents must contest a plebiscite election to win regional seats in the current Scottish Parliament. So a plebiscite election is a right to choose itself. Unlike the SNP leadership's resolution, which is asking Westminster to let it happen, this step makes it happen. The third step was creating respect within the independence movement. I mean, we're all aware here that there is a need to restore trust, camaraderie and a sense of purpose within the greater independence movement. And the primary responsibility to facilitate that is actually with the SNP leadership. It's the biggest organisation, and really you've got to show leadership to start building the trust. And it could do that by committing body and soul to the amended resolution that we submitted and involving other independent supporting parties in this endeavour. It would allow individual parties to still campaign for seats, but they must all agree that every vote cast for these parties on the list vote is a mandate to deliver independence. And if our resolution had passed and it had been followed by the leadership, then by now John Swinney and Kenny McCaskill and Ross Greer and Alison Mackay and Colette Walker and other members of, or other leaders of independent supporting parties would have been having a meeting to discuss a protocol and how to go forward. But obviously this hasn't happened yet, but hopefully something along these lines. And the idea was that they would meet and decide how they would agree to use the election as a plebiscite election. The fourth step was to mobilise the independence movement. And despite its current honourable position in the our favourable position in the opinion polls, the SNP as an organisation is diminished from what it was post-2014. Its membership has halved and its activist base has been largely hollowed out. And a constant theme from dissolution members is that they'll work if there's a declared date to work towards when Scotland will finally be independent. So the group decided that not just one but two dates must be integral to the amended resolution. The first is the Holyrood election date of the 7th of May 2026, when the Scottish electorate will decide whether to leave the Union. And that's a really important date, that's when they make the decision. And the second is the 1st of May 2027, when the Union will actually be dissolved. Now the period between is to allow the former UK government time to negotiate the dissolution of the UK. And if it fails to do so, then the Union is dissolved anyway on the 1st of May 2027. The next step was how to get us over the line. You'll be aware that there's a convention supposed to be starting. I think I've counted about 4 or 5 conventions. We heard the one the other day too, didn't we, Marlene? Of conventions. And conventions are fine, but basically conventions are where you just get people talking and trying, and it's a long time to get an agreement. It's a great thing to have and all the rest of it. But in order to get us over the line, it's important, I think, to focus on what we need to appeal to the majority of the Scottish people and do that quickly. And then once we're independent, provided that we've put the necessary building blocks in place, then we can take our time for what our long-term constitutional arrangement should be, banking practices and all these kind of things, and also local government, because I think we're all pretty dissatisfied with local government, its funding and all these kind of things. But to have the time to do that. But initially we were looking at how could we get there quickly over the line. So to implement the mandate, it requires a delivery mechanism. And as neither the Scottish Parliament nor the British Civil Service are empowered to be the mechanics for independence, another organisation is required. So we say step forward the Independence Delivery Unit. Now, since 2014, a number of organisations and individuals and experts, have been discussing, debating, considering how an independent Scotland should work from the start. And many of these groups comprise experts in the fields of currency, taxation, banking, social security, defence, etc. And as such, will be critical to the functioning of an independence delivery unit. So our proposal was that the leader of the SNP, acting as the leader of the SNP, not the First Minister, but acting as the leader of the SNP, would appoint what we call the IDU, not the UDI, but the IDU, in consultation with other Independence Party leaders. An IDU member's purpose is to quickly agree a framework and to do tasks to get us over the line of first securing the majority vote and second dissolving the union using their individual and collective expertise. Now, trust is the most important element in this enterprise, both among the political leaders and those entrusted to do the work of the Independence Delivery Unit. So there'll be quite a few people who are experts, obviously strong-minded, but they would be invited for the sake of a few months to put their egos at the door and try and come together. And for example, you might have some economists that favour the kind of modern money theory, others are more traditional. But in order to get us just over the line, we thought that it would be possible for them to knock their heads together and basically come up with some system which would get us over the line and allow us then to proceed as an independent government and parliament and people to develop the longer term structures. So, the sixth step was a political stewardship. So as the current Scottish Parliament cannot legislate for independence, it's necessary to create a new institution to steward the work of the Independence Delivery Unit and give political legitimacy to its work. So step forward the Provisional Government of Scotland. This all sounds very like Ireland, doesn't it? This organisation will have no legal power, but will be responsible for debating and approving the enabling legislation required on dissolution day. I should also say that the Independence Delivery Unit has got no legal power either at this stage. The Provisional Government will include all independent supporting MSPs elected in 2026 and 100 members chosen by the independent supporting parties proportionate to the terms of their share of the popular vote to deliver independence. The seventh step was finance. Financing the central political campaign, the work of the Independence Delivery Unit and the Provisional Government to deliver independence has to be addressed. The group was firmly of the opinion that no funds from the current Scottish Government be used, not just because the Unionists would complain, but also because it also challenges the financial commitment of the independence support. And we think that is really important, that we've got to actually see people can talk a good game, but if they don't actually support it, then we're going nowhere. It was envisaged that the members of the IDU and the Provisional Government would be unpaid, although the small secretariat required to serve them would be obviously remunerated. The eighth step was dissolution day itself. Now this is on the pretext that the United Kingdom government won't actually negotiate. I'm pretty convinced that if we were successful and got a vote, a majority vote, they might hum and haw initially, but within a relatively short period of time, as the dynamic worked out, that they would see it necessary to negotiate, because the last thing they want is basically to lose their prestige internationally. But we still had to look for a way by which, if they didn't negotiate, we were still off like a good bit of cheese, okay? Now, the union would be dissolved not later than the 1st of May 2027, whether the former UK government negotiated or not. On that date, the Provisional Government would become the Government of Scotland and declare the union dissolved. It would advise the international community and advise the civil service of the former UK of its obligations to both former partners of the UK. It would pass the enabling legislation that had been drafted and an interim constitution which would have been drafted by the IDU to start the new Scottish state. On that day, the former devolved Scottish Parliament will end and its functions will be taken over by the Parliament of Scotland, comprising all members of the former devolved Parliament. So that would be both the ones that had voted in nationalist MSPs, but also from the other parties, whether unionist or nationalist. Okay. Now the ninth step was international acceptance, and this is the one that a lot, talk about, that we've got to do it in a certain way or we don't get international acceptance. Well, it is important that some of the international community recognise the two former partners of the United Kingdom. Dissolution of a union is acknowledged in international law and organisations. The former state of Sweden and Norway was dissolved in 1905 and Czechoslovakia in 1992. The Vienna Convention of 1983 established rules of sharing of liabilities and assets between dissolving states where no agreement exists. Now, while that was not ratified, it largely confirms the previous common international practice. The Government of Scotland will have significant cards in any negotiations or standoff with the former UK government. And as Jim Siller suggests, Scotland is NATO's unsinkable aircraft carrier between Europe and North America. We live in a time of great international connection and trade. The UK has extensive multinational agreements which the Government of Scotland will implement insofar as it can. There are also hundreds of thousands of private agreements and contracts between ordinary people, multinational companies and Scottish-based businesses and institutions. These range from a timeshare in Spain to building frigates. There is no condition in these contracts, and I've even checked the one for the frigates, which terminates them on dissolution. These will not cease on dissolution day. Each party has an obligation to continue them, and to enforce them, the foreign contractor will require to recognise our law and state. So as a consequence, states whose commercial and human interests in Scotland are substantial will act with urgency to recognise both Scotland and the former UK. International law is primarily the law of the victor, and the motivation to engage in it and interpret it is in the self-interests of each state. Finally, we must be aware of the times we live in. GB plc is but a shadow of the former 2014 self. Brexit, a series of incompetent governments, and the rise of fascism and English exceptionalism has brought us to a new low which even ardent nationalists could not have contemplated. Despite the best efforts to mitigate the worst effects on our people, the life chances of all of us, whether haves or have-nots, are significantly threatened. And unless we take our independence through dissolving the Union, we could surely find ourselves denuded of our natural wealth and smothered in the bile of Farage and his followers within the next few years. The SNP leadership resolution provides no sense of urgency. It is both leisurely and indeterminate and will provide no respite to our suffering population. Its lack of a date and mechanism to deliver independence is half-hearted and deferential. The proponents of it know that it doesn't deliver independence without the consent of the UK government, and it proposes no sanction on the UK government if it doesn't consent. By contrast, our group's amendment brings all the disparate parts of the independence movement together in a short, focused, agreed campaign. It protects the legal integrity of the current devolved administration. It creates the Independence Delivery Unit to provide the practical framework to get over the line, drawing on a rich well of expertise. Finally, it establishes a provisional government to steward that framework and be ready to emerge as a government of an independent Scotland on dissolution day. It achieves all this within the law of Scotland and international norms. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And we failed.
No, you didn't fail. You didn't fail. The amendment was rejected, but so many really good amendments are rejected. Sometimes I think the better the amendment.
Even yours, Mary.
Well, actually, mine usually went through, but then they didn't act on them. That's the problem. No, I think thanks, Graeme, for giving us that very, very succinct and. Of what is quite a complicated plan, but it's actually a very simple plan when you look at how it works and the possible effects. So I'm sure there's lots and lots of questions. Sheena?
Yeah, I'm fully supportive of your idea, but it was rejected. So where do you go from here?
Gosh, I don't know. The group have agreed to continue. Obviously, as SNP members, we are supporting our candidates, as we must.
Have you got an idea how many members have still got?
Well, it's over 50,000.
Yeah, you're talking about the membership of the SNP?
Yes.
Yeah, it's about,
it's about 50,000.
50,000.
Easily the biggest in Scotland still, but not like what it was. Sorry, Julian.
There are quite a number of us who are the rebel group in the SNP. Cecilia Clegg is the county secretary for it, and she has asked to be continued membership of the group. There were quite a lot at that meeting that Graeme referred to, and we are not going away. So we are pursuing further action on this. We're not just saying, "Oh, that was abandoned, we failed, and therefore we'll throw it right away." We are going to continue. Now, having said that, the question she asked was what next, and what is happening next is that Yes United has been formed, and you mentioned Jim Sillars. He's a trustee of Yes United, as is Alex Leo and Simon Forrest. Simon Forrest came and talked to our Yes meeting on Wednesday this week, and they have plans to construct a prospectus for independent Scotland, dealing with all the topics that you mentioned, things like the economy, defence, pensions, and all these other issues which have been not properly fleshed out, not fleshed out at all actually by the SNP in the 10 years plus since the referendum. That's the work that the SNP should have been doing in this decade. That's going to start now, and there are quite impressive experts involved in various areas there. So I think there is a way forward, and I think that maybe if Yes United and the other groups could get together, and they have every intention of getting together. We didn't mention Gordon McIntyre, but he's a key element also in it. We need to get together, flesh out a plan, and we're looking at 2029 now, because at that point, with the election result last night, was it last night? No, last night. Caerphilly, the Welsh nationalists are on the up, Scottish nationalism is on the up. Support for independence hasn't really been below 50% for quite a while. And in Ireland, Sinn Féin is on the up. The likelihood is that all the elements will come together to rip the UK apart one way or another. And we need to be focused, first of all, on Holyrood and getting as many SNP as possible, or as many independent supported MSPs as possible would be better. And then concentrate our efforts fully on having a prospectus for independent Scotland we can take to the people and say, this is what we want, this is the kind of country we want, these are the details, and look to 2029 to be the point where we really...
John Swinney has set such a high bar of getting a majority of SNP seats, and I think that there will have to be a dawning realisation that that is really a high bar too high. And that an alternative strategy should be looking at a majority of the votes of independent supporting parties. Now, he's a stubborn individual, but if opinion polls started to show us, actually they are showing that even if he's got 40% of the vote, he's only getting 55 seats or thereby. That so he's still got another 10 or so seats to find. That hopefully. Over the rest of this year and possibly January, there might be a realisation, no, we've got to have an alternative, and there is time to do that. Now, if there was time to do that, it's making it quite tight, but it's still possible to have this independence delivery unit, and we would need to put faith in these people and basically say, look, you come together and get us something to get us over the line. Because, I don't know about you, but, I'm getting on, and 2029, you keep saying I'm never going to see it and all the rest of it, but I keep putting it back and back and back. And so that's certainly one of the things I think we as a group would still be pushing to consider that. As we said, there's 4 or 5 sort of convention ideas on the go. And you know, umpteen of us, we go to different meetings, and this weekend there's the Scottish Currency Group thing, which will be pretty impressive, I think. There's the Alba Conference, etc., etc. So and you can't get to them all. And the thing is that when you have conventions, quite rightly, everyone's looking to put their tuppence worth in, etc. And it really is very, very difficult to get that together. Now, we without even trying, one of the people that was supporting us, he contacted some, I'll not mention their names, but sort of world-renowned economists, and two of them came back and said they'd be really interested in getting involved. You know, so there are people out there, because just think about it. I mean, on your CV, I helped found the new Scottish state, or restored the old Scottish state. I mean, that's quite something, quite a feather in your cap. So there are people, you know, that are motivated by these things, and serious people. And the one thing I would say about our group, which I tried to emphasise in the debate, was, you know, we're no daft. You know, we've been there. Most of us couldn't qualify for the SNP youth group, but you know, we come from various backgrounds and various professional backgrounds and experience as well. And one of them in particular, she started her life, adult life, as a nun, and then she gave up holy orders and ended up in Ireland. And she was for 30 years, she was a facilitator between the warring groups during the Troubles. So she's basically spent her professional life listening to these people, getting them together and helping really do something significant. And there are very, very few people in Scotland, or indeed the UK, you know, who have had the sort of experiences that she's had. And I mean, she embraced what we were trying to do. So really serious people involved in this. And at the end of the day, it's all about political will. If you get the political leadership to do it, you will do it.
Okay,
Who knows how it goes?
So Colin had his hand up, I think.
So the people of Scotland are sovereign.
Yep.
And after all these steps that you're going through, when you've got these governments that follow on.
Yep.
So when do we get a return to direct democracy? Because a lot of people don't want another representative democracy that we can't get rid of. So
no. Well. First of all, to get us over the line, as I say, certainly enabling legislation would be required, and that's really basically to put in place an interim constitution. And that interim constitution has actually already been drafted. It's based on one that Professor Graeme McCormick wrote way back in the 1990s, but it's been upgraded. Gordon Kemp was involved, and I was involved in it. Mike Russell was involved in it. There are others involved in it as well.
Well, we were in Pensioners for Indy were involved.
That's right. And it doesn't scare the horses. So whether you're a royalist or a republican or anything else, or Stalinist or whatever, it doesn't scare the horses. It gets us over the line. And then, as soon as we are independent, for a long-term constitution, you're talking about citizens' assemblies and discussing, whether we have a system like Switzerland, it's a federal system, but also, participatory.
I asked this question because it comes up a lot of the times in the street, because people are so scunnered by the way politicians in general.
Well, that's right. I mean, I would be very much in favour of that.
A different system.
That's right. But that's for the people to decide, and not saying they should do it leisurely, but it wouldn't be absolutely imperative to have that in place the day before independence, but shortly thereafter.
Marlene?
That was really great hearing about that. I want to be in the Independence Delivery Unit. That sounds fantastic. But the motion didn't get passed. However, but there's still going to be a list vote next year. So, have you got any plans about how to approach that? Because whether or not it went through, if there could be a majority of Indy votes on that. But then you and I were at a meeting recently where we heard actually John Curtis saying, look, be careful how you talk about this, because now that reform's on the stage in Scotland, it's quite possible that there could be a majority SNP presence in Holyrood without there having been a majority on the list vote. So it's complicated. But anyway, the basic question is, what are you thinking about going forward to the election?
Well, I've actually been asked to attend the ALBA conference tomorrow, so I'm going up to say a few words, and I'm sort of in discussions with Kenny McCaskill, and I'm open to discussions with anyone else, as are the group. I mean, I'm not leading the group, by the way, I'm just part of it, so don't think it's me. But it kind of seems to throw the apples at me, the bananas. But anyway, so we're going to keep the discussion going here and see how it develops. And as I say, opinion polls start to show different things, all the rest of it. There could well be some movement along the lines. But, if for example, the SNP failed to get the numbers of seats, but we actually achieved the vote, then, well, John Swinney's going to have to be asked, how do you answer that one, John? And he's going to have to be asked it before the election. If he doesn't show that he's prepared to change. He will be, to some extent, buoyed with the idea that Starmer and Alexander have kind of hinted that they would consider a majority seat vote seriously. I mean, that's all they've said. They've not said that they're going to commit
because
to it.
I think it might not happen.
Well, I think they're pretty confident on that, on there. But so he'll be buoyed up with that, and to some extent that was disappointing, that they said that, because I still don't believe that they would agree to it in any shape or form, and I think it's just completely unrealistic. And I mean, it's almost like a fraud. I really felt that what the SNP leadership was offering the party was basically a bit of a fraud. That if you cannot deliver it, admit you don't believe in the Scottish sovereignty. If you believe in Scottish sovereignty, then you don't need to ask anyone. And that really is the legal position. They unfortunately wheeled out this lady I'd never heard of before, Anne Fauld, who seems to be a public law specialist, and she spoke in the debate. She came up with 2 points, which, I mean, I've checked. I was a lawyer for 40 odd years, and I've checked the legal position. And she referred to the fact that 2011 created a precedent whereby, because the UK government at that time agreed to a referendum based on the SNP getting a majority of seats, that basically created a precedent. And that precedent, that there would be a good chance of if the UK government refused to grant the referendum, then there was a good chance that could go to the UK Supreme Court, and in a review of that, in a review of that, there was a good chance that precedent would be followed. The first thing to be said about that is precedent. Well, precedent, first of all, is not. It's imported into Scots law. It wasn't. It didn't form part of Scots law until after 1707. But be that as it may, the point about precedent is in law is that it's one court following a previous decision of another court based on the same facts. Now, and that's right, case law. Now, 2011, there was no court involved in that decision. That was Cameron. It had it ratified by the UK Parliament and also the Scottish Parliament, but it was Cameron's decision. There was no court involved. So basically, that is not precedent. The other more important point is even that the UK Supreme Court can review decisions of the UK government, the Scottish government, but it cannot review decisions of the UK Parliament, because Parliament is sovereign in size. So basically, all that Starmer has to do is to ask the UK Parliament, to ratify a refusal, which he will get because of the numbers he's got, end of story. So, but it was rather annoying for me that in his final summing up, John referred specifically to this lady to thank her for the advice that she had given, so I didn't get a reply at that particular point. I tried to emphasise before that the difference between, this wasn't a dispute between a Parliament and a Parliament, it was a dispute between the UK Parliament and the Southern Scottish people, and the Southern Scottish people would trump that. But anyway, that wasn't accepted, or wasn't accepted by the majority that they had in that vote. But anyway, so we are there. I think the position is really quite fluid. and that there will be some form of realisation that the SNP have got to move their position, because they are going to be in a difficult position. And the other thing too is that, you know, if you don't have anything to inspire people to come out, you know, if they don't come out, and let's say, and it's entirely possible that people are so scunnered that you get an actual turnout of less than 60% at the election. Unions are quite entitled to say, Scottish folk aren't bothered about independence if that's all you can get out. You know? So we've got to be really, really aware of that and get people registered to vote. And that was one of the great things of getting all the parties together. At least that is something we could all do together. We could all go out and get folk registered to vote, you know, and then we could you know, promote our parties individually if we wanted to do that. But that so far is not happening.
Do you think that you know, the recent, what's it called, Memorandum of Understanding between SNP and Believe in Scotland? So that's just the beginnings of a process, and you know, Gordon's, I mean, I've heard Gordon as well now talking about 2020.
Oh, I know.
But anyway, it is a start. It's got the two biggest players in the Yes movement talking to each other, and Gordon's talking to the other independence parties, but also groups, like yourselves at some point. So do you think that might be a kind of a sort of envelope to take forward the independence delivery unit, like could be part of that, something that comes out of the Congress that they're aiming for?
Well, it could be. I mean, I'm not going to reject it out of hand. The cynic would suggest to me, and they would kind of suggest it's kind of kicking the can down the road. And why does John Swinney, or better watch what I'm saying now, Bill Ramsey's just come in, but why does John Swinney use Gordon McIntyre Kemp as a surrogate to contact the other leaders? You know?
And do you know which other leaders have been involved in this? They've mentioned Alaba, and I'm presuming the Greens, because they said they talked to all of them who had MSPs and so on. But I mean, how are they actually talking to all the different?
Well, I think, to be fair to Gordon, yes, I think he is. Yes. Well, yes, he was going to speak to them. I contacted them, but they didn't come back to me. The Scottish Independence Party, Colette Hooker, as well. So no, I think that genuinely they're trying to talk, and they're trying to go beyond that to the churches and the trade unions, etc. I mean, a wee bird in the Church of Scotland told me that the ministers had been told to keep their mouth shut.
Well, I think that's where it does get complicated. If you talk about a civic issues and the trade unions will be willing to be part of it. The Independence Congress is something different.
Well, it is, that's right.
You know, fair enough that they would take
We were trying to have a real sense of urgency about this, because if you really are concerned about poverty and goodness knows lack of opportunity and things down the line, and our birthright as regards energy and all these kind of supplies, if you really have a sense of urgency about it, I think you go ahead and do it and try it. You're not going to lose anything at the end of the day. All you can do is lose a democratic vote. That's democracy. But then you just pick yourself up and you do it again. You know, on that.
Sense of urgency is something that John Swinney's not got.
No, I mean,
somebody would have to give him a jag.
I mean, manana is basically too strong. You know, it's too urgent for them, I think. But that's that's it. But the conventions are fine. But you know, congresses. But the other thing you've got to watch is, of course, that the people that are maybe driving that have their own ideas about. Economics, banking, and all these other things, you know, and if their nose goes out of joint, then you know you can find that these things kind of stop or stutter or whatever, and don't necessarily pick up pace. And we're dealing with really highly intelligent, but also with really big egos. Yeah. I'm one to talk, but you know they have big egos, and they're very much sort of driving things, in my view, in their own, not in their own image, but in their own concepts.
Quite a bit of established power too, and connections and everything.
Yeah.
Some more questions? Yeah, Echo.
Well, just what about Liberate Scotland?
Yeah.
What's happening about that?
Well, I mean, I'm not part of that, but I mean, I'm more than respect. Well, I just haven't. You know, I mean, I don't really subscribe to the idea that Scotland's a colony. You know, I respect what they're doing, but I don't subscribe to that, and I can't really subscribe to it in this proposition, because we're saying Scotland is a partner in a union.
Robert Black's come out and said it.
Pardon?
Yeah.
Well, Robert Black actually was one of my lecturers at university. Right. I thought he was dead about 20 years ago, but he seems to have. But with all due respect,
he used to be not convinced of it.
I know.
The
That's
evidence,
right.
and now
Well, I mean, I think there's more than an argument to be put about it. All I'm saying is that we should use.
You say we're not a colony. So you explain to me how we're not a colony.
Yeah,
well,
you tell me.
Right.
Go on.
Well, it's in the name, the union. the union. No, I know. No.
We're not in a union.
No, we are in a union.
No, we're not.
That's a contradiction.
No, well, that's right. It turned into an incorporated union. Normally, in international law, there was a treaty of union. That was it. And the very fact that the unionists subscribed to the idea that we are in a union, in an international legal sense, that is an argument which can be put.
Could I think it was Oliver Brown who, long ago, who said, under Mr de Valera, Ireland changed its name to Era. Britain didn't change its name, it stayed England just the same. So no change to England.
No, but that, yeah. You've got to look at these things within a certain legal context. You know, now you might disagree what that context is, but there is a legal context. But law is something which is not dead. Law is a living thing. Our legal system and all the rest of it is a living thing that progresses. And you've kind of got to look at this. Now, Liberty, as I've said, I mean, I'm more than delighted that they are doing this and pursuing this. And, you know, if that is a route which is successful, that's fantastic. It's not a quick route, because, you know, even if they're successful, it doesn't mean to say that the UK will accept it.
I think the liberation work is really useful. And if they reach the next stage of their work, that, in my view, becomes politically salient. What do I mean by that? It means that folk outside this room will start to think about it. So if they reach the next stage, I'm personally disappointed that the party has kept them at arm's length. That's one opinion. But if they reach the next stage, it would be very difficult for the party to keep them at arm's distance. And at that point, in my view, they then become politically salient. They become politically relevant, and I think there is value, a great deal of value to what they're doing. If they manage to reach the next stage, if they don't, then I'm talking about what's politically salient to the voters. Then I'm not sure if we'll have much mileage for some considerable time after that. Because it has, in my view, it has to connect with the voters. I'm well aware of the mainstream media and the pernicious role, which to some folk here, they suddenly discovered that about 15 years ago, if they've been on the planet for half a century, as if the mainstream media was any friend of ordinary people before then. But I think it could become really salient if they managed to reach the next stage. I was listening to a video last week, because I didn't take any interest in them until they reached the UN. They put a lot of work in it, they deserve respect, they deserve to be listened to. But if they even get to the next step, or even if the next step is not decided, then I think it becomes politically salient. And then it will be up to people like me and others to prepare to, within the SNP, to turn around and say, put pressure on that they should be listened to.
Well, I would agree entirely with that, Bill. But what we've been trying to do is put a sense of urgency into this. And if you want to go down the colonial path, then that is going to take time. If you go down dissolving a union, the potential for that is much quicker. That could have, the decision could have been made on the 7th of May 2026. within 8, 9 months, that decision, and we would have been independent a year later.
And if it doesn't work, then you continue.
You can still do. That's right.
You've still got that to
That's right. That's all I'm saying. So that's why, if you want it quickly, then the way to do it would be to look at dissolving the union. At the end of the day, it still requires a majority of the Scottish people to vote that way. But you're giving them that opportunity. You're giving them the right to choose.
Robert,
That's why we have to have every vote for an independent candidate, whether it's on the list or the, well, basically more on the list, because the SNP should get the constituency votes. On the list, we've got to count their votes and the MSPs that come from that as the overall majority. We can't just say, or just SNP.
No, that was the whole point of ours. That's right.
If we don't come together and agree to that type of thing, then the unions will go, well, it was all based on the SNPs, and they haven't done it.
That's right. That's right.
the
That's all I
unionists
agree.
will chop and change depending on which worked better for them. Right, Sheena?
Just 2 points. When you got voted down at the conference, what was the vote for and against, and have you got any idea why the people weren't convinced by your...
Well, I don't know what I mean, I have heard various, because I was at the front and I couldn't see, but as far as somebody has said to me 10%, somebody said to me 30%, so I just don't know.
But no,
That was the vote that we got,
for them,
but I just don't know. I don't know.
Okay, Moira?
I just wanted to ask, because you hang so much on the Treaty of Union, and as I understand it, a treaty has obligations and responsibilities, and we hear since recently, not least from Robert Black, Professor Robert Black, that these have been ignored, and he's named the way they've been ignored. So what does that mean for you then? I mean, do you not look differently on the Treaty of Union?
Well, I don't think there's an international treaty that's ever been signed that hasn't been in some way, between different countries. We are in a union. We are in a union, whether we like it or not. Yes, and a voluntary union. The unionists say we're in a voluntary union. Keep that. They say it.
I think that it's imperative that you definitely insist that you're in a union. Otherwise, this project that you're talking about can't go through.
I think it's 2 broader points. About a year or less ago, I learned that Scotland militarily had effectively been colonised. When there's only need to go, I mean, it was the work that was done, it was explained in a conference in Perth a few months ago. And actually the evidence is there. All you need to go to any castle in Scotland and you will see it superimposed by 18th century military architecture. You've all seen the 24 pounders in various castles and sites.
Fort Augustus, Fort William.
They were only put there to see off the French in 1908 and 1808. They were put there for other reasons. And they weren't put there because the Spanish or the Habsburgs was going to land up in Wick and attack south. So these are military realities. And there were reasons they were put there, and I now understand that. And I've only learned it in my 69th year, okay? But here's a second point I learned a long time ago when I did a politics degree half a century ago. International relations, the basic bedrock of international relations is not treaties, it is power. And there is a tendency within the Scottish national movement, and I share it, to try and think at times that by a hop, skip, and a legalistic jump, and no blood, you get somewhere. Now, I'm not into the bloodline, I'm not into the boom boom. But there is a hypocrisy to some extent. Some of the reasons why certain things have occurred in Northern Ireland and the devolved settlement, for instance, the fact they've got #1 status when it comes to human rights, is because they were involved in the boom boom, something we wouldn't touch. And as Winnie Ewing said at SNP conference in the ballroom in Rothsay, and she said this, and we were sitting back to my God, as she said then, and it was a 1980s context, as my good friend Robert McGavie said, maybe the Scottish people don't suffer enough. Now I know that many in here weren't in the party, but I heard Winnie say that. So, and I'm not suggesting warfare or terrorism or anything like that. That's a line we're not going down, and I want to make that clear when that is online. But there's a point about international relations. There are treaties and there is power. And just because you've seen a formulaic way forward and way of treaties, and it has justice, because I see myself in the realist school of international relations, I see it as faux justice, as FAUX. You know, the treaties are important, but they're not the whole thing. So to some extent, you know, you take what lines, peaceful lines you can develop, and you take them forward. But, you know, just because with new things have occurred within the wider independence movement, very valuable things, and the SNP for various reasons haven't caught up, then, you know, those are the political things we say. Thanks.
Julian had his hand up.
Question: have you read Doon Harden?
Yes, actually, I was given a copy by his wife in exchange for my book. My book was, I think, 100 pages with the photographs, and I think his book now about 250 pages. So he had a lot more work involved in his than mine. But no, it's a very good book. I've actually got a written agreement from John Swinney. He gave me a written agreement.
Like the Treaty of Union.
Like the Treaty of Union. Which admittedly is still unfulfilled.
Yeah, like the Treaty of Union.
You know, I've still got it. He gave this to me voluntarily, and I've got it on my phone. So, you know, if he doesn't deliver on certain things fairly soon, then just with my own self-respect.
You've got leverage with him, have you?
Well, so far it hasn't manifested itself, obviously, but, you know, it is there. And I mean, there comes a point that, you know, if he doesn't deliver on the main parts of it, then I will have to go public with that.
It's true. Yeah.
Thanks very much, Graeme. That was a really, really interesting and exciting talk, and thank you very much.
But the other thing we noticed from the questions was that we now have a very strange position. We seem to have as many people adamant that we're a colony as we do who are adamant that we're sovereign, therefore we should be able to succeed. And yet these two positions are opposed to each other.
They're sort of mutually exclusive, aren't they?
Yeah,
and that comes up in the discussions. At one point, Graeme says, "Look, you can't have it both ways. I mean, if you say we're a colony, you can't argue, you can't talk about being sovereign and seceding from the Union because that's not what colonies really do." And I mean, afterwards, I thought, well, that's maybe something. Let's see what happens in Holyrood election next year, and this is maybe something to come back to.
Definitely something to come back to. I am fascinated to see which of these different, very different and actually opposing positions ends up being the one that works. And then you've also got the ICCPR, which is proceeding on another parallel track. And then you've got Swinney's plan kind of also in the race.
Yeah, exactly. And I think which one maybe comes to the fore, it's a bit like a race, not quite a race, but, you know, different, as you say, parallel tracks. Which one kind of maybe starts to take precedent might well depend on what the response is from Westminster. Because depending on what they say, that will back up one or other of the possibilities, and maybe the others are not quite so significant at that point. But who knows?
We'll just watch them all with interest and see what.
Indeed.
Thanks for listening, everybody. I hope you enjoyed that. If you want to make sure you're following us and subscribe to us, then you get notified every time we put something new out so you don't miss anything. That would be great. Also, you can click the little bell if you're watching on YouTube.
And sign up for our mailing list. You can do that from the website, and we always send one out at the beginning of each month to tell you what's happening. Last but not least, you can buy us a coffee on coffee.com.